Here she goes again. Hide your face, hide your neck, duck your head, wear an NFL football helmet when you are playing in a game versus Djonai Carrington. Fresh off of clotheslining, a Kane and Undertaker clothesline from hell that she delivered to Sophie Cunningham, this girl is right back on the court, hitting people upside the head once again. This girl needs to be kicked out of the league. She's a menace to the league at this point, and it's unsafe for players to be out there.
Djonai Carrington thought the return game would be her opportunity to silence the criticism, but instead, it turned into a night that appeared to leave her visibly shaken. As the crowd turned against her and chants calling for her ban echoed throughout the arena, the tension became impossible to ignore. But what sparked such a harsh reaction from the fans? And why did Carrington seem to break down as the chants grew louder? Could there be more to this story than what happened on the court?
It only took 2 games for dirtbag Djonai Carrington to be back to her dirty tricks. Djonai Carrington balled out her first game back. Ooh, under the legs. Whoa, between the legs. Wow, behind the back. I've never seen this type of play before in the WNBA. This is incredible. And then here we are, the very next game, and dirtbag Djonai back to...
The most uncomfortable moments surrounding Djonai Carrington may have had nothing to do with a basketball being thrown toward a rim. After a controversial week that turned her name into one of the biggest talking points in the WNBA, the conversation around Carrington quickly expanded far beyond what happened on the court. What began as a basketball story soon evolved into a much larger debate, placing her at the center of intense public scrutiny and nonstop discussion.
Djonai Carrington cannot avoid controversy. The dirtbag was back in the building tonight against the Golden State Valkyries, and once again she cannot keep her appendages to herself. Definition of appendages: her arms, her hands. She finds a way to always use them to inflict pain on others. And she's just, quite frankly, a reckless...
What was supposed to be another chapter in her return to the court has instead turned into a storm of criticism, angry reactions, and growing questions about whether the relationship between Carrington and some basketball fans has reached a breaking point. And if you have been following the chaos surrounding the Chicago Sky Star, you already know that this story did not begin with just one game.
This girl will not stop until she ends somebody's career. Djonai Carrington, once again, with another dirty foul in less than a week, in just a couple of days apart from each other. A couple of days apart from the Sophie Cunningham hard foul. You have Mrs. Eye Poke, Mrs. Flagrant foul. I'm gonna grab your head, I'm gonna hit your head upside your head, knock you out the air. Mrs. I'm gonna pull your hair. Mrs. I'm gonna whack you on the back of your head. Mrs. Long nailed,
it began with
sharp
an incident
knob,
against the
fingertips.
Indiana Fever
Djonai Carrington
that instantly became
strikes.
Another chapter in one of the WNBA's most emotionally charged rivalries. On August 8th, Carrington and the Sky faced Indiana in a game that was quickly overshadowed by a physical confrontation involving Sophie Cunningham. Carrington was ejected after officials ruled the play a flagrant 2, and the incident immediately exploded across social media. The controversy grew even larger after Carrington posted the words "white privilege" following the game, turning what had already been a heated basketball debate into a much broader conversation about race, sportsmanship, discipline, and how players are treated when emotions boil over. At that point, Carrington was no longer being discussed simply as a basketball player involved in a controversial foul. Her name had become part of a national argument. Before the current controversy, Carrington had built her reputation on toughness, intensity, and the kind of defensive pressure that coaches often appreciate and opposing offensive players often find frustrating.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, the lunacy, the absolute hypocrisy of the WNBA. It never ends, and I don't think it's ever going to be. You didn't expect that, did you? Of course you did. We see it every single day. You know, Stephanie White showed us she is way in over her head without telling us that she's way in over her head. Actually, she told us she's way in over her head. We'll get to that in a minute.
Then
the
came
latest
the Caitlin
disgrace
Clark era.
was
Suddenly,
from Stephanie White, who,
every
by the way,
physical
was
play
booed.
involving Carrington had the potential to become a social media event. The attention surrounding her intensified even further after the highly publicized 2024 incident involving Clark, when Carrington was accused of making contact with Clark's eye during a game. That moment remained part of the basketball conversation long after the final buzzer, and Carrington increasingly became connected to one of the league's most polarizing storylines. But there is a difference between being criticized by opposing fans and feeling as though the people watching have completely turned against you. That distinction matters because when a player walks into an arena, there is an expectation that fans may boo an opponent wearing the other team's jersey. However, when the criticism becomes personal, the atmosphere can feel entirely different. Carrington returned during Chicago's 94-88 victory over Connecticut, bringing the same defensive intensity that had become part of her identity. Ironically, her return should have been a celebration. After months of recovering from injury and working her way back into game shape, she finally had another opportunity to remind everyone why she had earned her place in the WNBA.
Sophie Cunningham Part 2 would be Sophie Cunningham, Skylar Diggins, Kate Martin, Sarah Ashley Barker, Jessica Shepard, Part 97, Caitlin Clark Eye Gouge, Part 95 when it comes to Djonai Carrington. Here she is on the floor being dirty once again. The girl cannot help herself at this point. She can't help it. Take a look at this. Okay,
she put her hands
swing
up
at the
like
ball, but then you hit her all in the face with your other hand.
She was beginning a new chapter with the Chicago Sky, facing a league where she had already built a reputation as one of the most physical and competitive defenders in the game. But instead of becoming the start of a quiet comeback story, her return quickly turned into another chapter in a controversy that seemed determined to follow her everywhere. That is the strange reality of sports in the social media era. An athlete can spend months recovering, training, studying film, rebuilding confidence, and preparing their body for competition, only for one moment during a game to overshadow everything that came before it. The conversation can shift from how well someone is playing to what happened on a single possession, and suddenly an entire season is being viewed through the lens of one incident. Once Carrington left the court, the basketball discussion was almost completely buried beneath a much larger debate about punishment, responsibility, and whether the league should take stronger action. Fans immediately began asking whether the WNBA would suspend her, whether the Chicago Sky would publicly defend her, whether additional discipline was coming, and perhaps most importantly, whether Carrington truly understood how angry the situation had made people.
And I love how people say later the technical rescinded. That was the fastest rescinded technical I've ever seen. I said, oh, I went to ESPN.
It was like an hour after.
It was like technical. And then as soon as I was like technical rescinded right underneath, I was like, yeah, I think they got it right too. I don't think that there was any intention. I don't think she sought out the ref. I listen, I'm on her side on this one.
It was fast.
But again, that was the fastest. Let's take a record for that. Was that the fastest rescinded technical?
No.
Which allowed Carrington to suit up against the Seattle Storm, entering the game with 5:21 remaining in the first quarter. That decision created another layer of controversy because critics viewed the absence of an immediate suspension as evidence that the league was not treating the incident seriously enough, while Carrington supporters believed the backlash had already gone far beyond reasonable criticism. Somewhere between those two positions was Carrington herself, trying to continue playing professional basketball while her name was being dragged through an internet courtroom where nearly everyone seemed to have appointed themselves judge, jury, and commissioner. The problem with an internet courtroom, of course, is that the verdict often arrives before anyone bothers to examine the evidence. Then came the fan reaction, and this is where the story becomes particularly complicated. There is credible reporting about Carrington's ejection, the backlash surrounding the incident, her social media activity, and the intense debate among WNBA fans. However, the specific claim that her own fans collectively chanted ban her, and that Carrington literally broke down because of those chants should not be treated as confirmed without reliable footage or reporting that clearly establishes that exact sequence of events.
Djonai with another signature move yet again versus the Valks tonight.
And then she put both hands up.
Damn. What is she doing with her left hand? Look at her left hand. Just boom. Let me just poke you in the eye real quick. What is this goofball, uncoordinated individual doing, poking somebody in the eye with their hands up? Hands up. Dude, this is so bad. Hands up.
That distinction
Swipe
matters
for the
because
ball
the
with our right
reality
hand
is already
while
dramatic
poking the
enough
player
without
in the-
adding details that cannot be verified. Carrington does not need a manufactured breakdown to show why a situation like this could become emotionally draining for any professional athlete. Imagine spending years building a career at the highest level of your sport, only to reach a point where a growing number of people seem more interested in your controversies than your actual performance on the court. Every foul becomes evidence. Every reaction becomes evidence. Every social media post becomes evidence. And every mistake becomes another chapter in a story that refuses to disappear. At some stage, the athlete is no longer simply playing basketball. Carrington has built a professional career around defensive intensity, physical play, competitiveness, and a willingness to do the difficult work that does not always show up in highlight reels. Her career has included recognition as one of the league's stronger defenders, and her move to Chicago in 2026 marked another important chapter after signing with the Sky. That is why reducing her entire career to a single controversial incident fails to capture the bigger picture.
When someone does something like that, basketball nature, if I poke, because I poke people in the eyes playing basketball, I've hit people in the head playing basketball. It's a part of the sport, of course. But how you react after definitely plays a role in your character. I'm gonna be real with you. You can either walk away from the situation or you can try to help them up. But acting like nothing happened or staring people down shows me a lot about your character. The fact that she got her hands up, she's not going to check on her. She's not saying my bad, my fault. She's not checking to see, are you okay? No. Just poked her in the eyes.
At the same time, Carrington cannot completely escape the uncomfortable reality of professional sports because athletes are ultimately judged by what they do when the pressure is at its highest. If you want the spotlight when you are making big plays, you also have to accept the spotlight when you make a mistake, and that version of the attention can be far louder than the first. Carrington is learning that lesson in real time. Her situation also reveals something much larger about the modern WNBA, because games no longer end when the final buzzer sounds. The final whistle may stop the players, but it certainly does not stop the internet.
So, Djonai Carrington has responded publicly for the first time since flagrantly fouling Sophie Cunningham and then posting white privilege on Threads while tagging the Indiana Fever. The only problem is her comments don't make any sense. That's the only issue I got. They're too vague to make any sense. So she responded to a Emmanuel Acho video where he said
conversation surrounding
somebody
that
needs
foul
to share
did
this
not
message
end
to
there.
Djonai Carrington.
And Carrington's
You
own
can't
social
call
media activity only added fuel to the fire. After the Cunningham incident, she posted the words white privilege, which immediately became another major point of controversy. Critics argued that the post introduced an entirely new and divisive element to the situation, while supporters insisted that the broader context needed to be considered before judging her reaction. As a result, the discussion quickly expanded beyond the foul itself and into larger debates about race, accountability, discipline, and the culture surrounding the WNBA. Suddenly, the basketball play was almost secondary. People were arguing about the meaning of the post, the severity of the foul, the league's disciplinary standards, Cunningham's role in the confrontation, Caitlin Clark's place in the broader rivalry, and how different players are treated when controversial incidents occur. Somehow, amid all that noise, Carrington still had to prepare for another game. That is where the irony becomes impossible to ignore. Some believe the scrutiny is justified, while others feel the attention has gone too far. Once fans choose sides, neutrality on the internet becomes nearly impossible.
See, this is the important part. Once again, siding with an opponent that did damage physically to one of her own players. This time it was that Djonai Carrington, the woman who hit Sophie Cunningham around the neck with a flagrant foul. The previous one was Alyssa Thomas throat punching her star, Caitlin Clark. Both times, the most moronic of all coaches, Stephanie
If
White,
you support Carrington,
defended
someone
the
will
other
accuse
player.
you
This
of
time she
excusing
came
her
up with an
behavior.
excuse.
If you criticize Carrington, someone else will accuse you of being part of a larger agenda. If you defend Cunningham, you are suddenly placed on one side of the rivalry, while defending Carrington puts you on the other. Meanwhile, Carrington still has practices, film sessions, teammates, coaches, flights, and most importantly, games that need to be won. That is the part often forgotten when an athlete becomes the center of an online controversy. Players do not receive a special schedule that says basketball will resume after social media finishes arguing about them. They have to keep moving forward whether the internet is ready to move on or not. For Carrington, the challenge now is not simply surviving the backlash. That may be the most frustrating part for everyone involved, because Carrington can argue with critics online, but she cannot win a social media debate simply by typing faster. She can explain herself publicly, but eventually the conversation has to return to what happens on the court. If she plays well, people will have a reason to talk about her performance. If she struggles, the criticism will only grow louder. And if she is involved in another controversial play, the internet will probably react as though it has just discovered electricity for the first time. That is the environment she is playing in.
She's absolutely reckless, and until she actually injures somebody, will the WNBA ever do something about it? Clearly not. Now, what we saw tonight against the Golden State Valkyries pales in comparison to what happened against Sophie Cunningham. Pales in comparison to the eye gouge that Caitlin Clark received.
And there is another layer to this
in
story that
comparison
makes Carrington's
to the rake
situation
across the
even more
eyes
complicated, because she has already shown that she can step into emotionally difficult environments and still perform. Her history with Connecticut is a perfect example. Carrington spent the early years of her professional career with the Connecticut Sun, established herself as a key defender there, and later faced the emotional challenge of competing against her former organization. The question now is whether she can turn that pressure into motivation rather than allowing it to overwhelm her. That is why the next stretch of the season could become so fascinating. What she needs to prove is actually much simpler. She needs to show that the controversy does not control her basketball. She needs to prove that one ejection does not define her. She needs to prove that one social media post does not define her. Most importantly, she needs to remind people that the player who built her reputation through defense, toughness, and relentless competitive intensity is still there beneath all the noise. Because right now, there are two very different stories being told about Djonai Carrington.
Let me say that the WNBA has problems. The WNBA has a leadership problem. The WNBA has a player problem. And the WNBA has a media problem. What do I mean? Kathy Engelbert. This is
One
the kind
story
of
portrays
stuff
her
that
as one of the
happens
WNBA's
because
villains,
it has
with
been
critics arguing that her physical style of play and repeated controversies have pushed many fans beyond the point of patience. Carrington's story is no longer centered on a single foul, but on what happens when a professional athlete becomes the focus of a controversy that refuses to fade away. The ejection, the criticism, the social media backlash, the debate over discipline, and the ongoing discussions involving Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham have generated enormous attention around one player. Yet beneath all that noise, the season continues to move forward. The real question is not simply whether Djonai Carrington can survive one hostile crowd or one difficult week of criticism. The same people demanding punishment today may be talking about something completely different tomorrow. That is the strange reality of sports. Fans can turn against an athlete incredibly fast, but they can also change their minds just as quickly when that athlete gives them a reason to. For Carrington, the path forward may be far simpler than the controversy itself. She cannot control every chant. What she can control is how she responds when the ball is finally placed in her hands. And if Carrington can turn all of this noise into motivation, the controversy that now threatens to define her could eventually become nothing more than one chapter in a much larger career. The question is whether she can make that transformation before the next controversy finds her again.